Everybody, today we are with Paolo Gallo, keynote speaker and executive coach and JAC professor of at Bocconi University in Milano, and with our General Secretary Fabrizio Macrì. And today we will talk about a super interesting book. The English title is 7 Games of Leadership. In Italian it will be L'arte di crescere, 7 passi per diventare leader, and we will have the possibility to understand more about the book with the interview. So Fabrizio, do you want to start and introduce Paolo Gallo?
Thank you, Fametta. Hi Paolo, how are you doing?
Well, first of all, great to be here. I'm back again at the Camera di Commercio. Thanks for inviting me today.
Thanks for being here. It's an honor to have you with us. And so we are going to present your book on the 30th of May in Zurich. And I'm sure it's going to be a very interesting event for our members and partners. We have quite an important English-speaking community belonging to our membership base. And it's very international oriented with a career oriented mindset. So I'm sure that all your useful insights coming from the book, which I personally read and found extremely interesting, will help them focus on their future career. That's why I prepared for you a couple of questions, Paolo. They're not always friendly questions. Some of them are challenging questions. So in order for our viewers to have also some fun, okay. But I would start with an easy one. So Paolo, just tell us briefly about the 7 games. What are they and why are they so useful?
Listen, I can tell maybe a quick story, because some time ago my daughter, she's now 18, she asked me, "Hey Dad, what did you learn in your 30 years career being head of human resources for the European Bank, the World Bank, and the World Economic Forum?" And I'm a coach. I spoke with 1,000 of people in my classrooms and all the rest. And then I told her, what is to that 1,000 of conversations in my life? In reality, I think I have the same conversation 1,000 of times, because I saw and I noticed that regardless of whatever variable, sector, age, gender, or political or sexual preferences, or ideology, or whatever it is, people are going through certain challenges and certain phases in their personal and professional development. And there are some elements that are particularly tricky and difficult to decode. So I wanted to write a book and the purpose to help the reader to understand where he or she is in his own journey, and try to decode the complexity, and also to find tools, instruments, and modalities in order to continue growing. And while the first book, The Compass and the Radar, or The Busta del Successo in Italian, was mainly focused on professional development, this one is more focused on personal development. Therefore, you're going to find more themes related to psychology, coaching, and personal development compared to the first one.
Interesting. So unfortunately, we have a time constraint, so we are not going to be able to go through all the 7 games. So I'm gonna ask you some questions in order for the readers to understand what's going on here. And the second questions I want to ask you is very personal, because as you know, I was born in Rome, and I was fascinated by the description that you made about the Roman god Janus. Can you tell us why is it relevant?
It's relevant because in my book, I try to explain the difference between change and transformation, okay? Change is something that occurs outside us. Let's say all of us, for example, we move to a different country. I'm talking the 3 people having this conversation today, or maybe we change job, or we change house, or we change a sector, or whatever it is. So that implies the necessity of adaptation. And this is about change. And change management is a discipline. But transformation is something completely different, which is fundamentally means you have transformed. you have changed as an individual. And I've noticed that there was a very interesting element based on love history and Greek history and mythology, because when the Romans conquered Greece, they decided to fundamentally ditch their deities. They had more than 2,000. It was a bit of a mess to manage all of them. And they decided to cut and paste fundamentally the Greek gods, except one. That was Janus. And Janus is, in Italiano, is called Giano Bifronte. He's the only god with two faces. One looking at the past, that implies gravitas, and one looking at the future with a young face that implies Juventus. And gravitas means judgment, capacity of understanding, wisdom. And the Juventus is not only a soccer team, it's also a word that implies youth, energy, positiveness, and optimism. So in a moment of transformation, as the one that we're living right now, I think you need to celebrate Janus. Therefore, you need to rely on the experience that you have gained in the past, but with an optimistic, energetic view of what is coming next. And so the god of transformation, Janus, I think should be celebrated in a moment of transformation like the one that we're living in.
Very interesting. Guys, you really need to be there. This is going to last. Imagine, these insights are going to last for more than 1 hour. We only have a few minutes today. So the third question, it's just out of curiosity. You mentioned, in your book, you mentioned some experts. You quote some experts which actually give us very interesting insights about the job market. And one of them, Mr. Barberis, Riccardo Barberis, says that for younger generation, the pattern study, work hard, and you'll be better off doesn't work anymore. So I ask you, is it true? How is it true? And isn't it dangerous? I mean, don't we run the risk of losing focus on the principle of competence? Work more, be more competent, create value for yourself and for others.
Now, this is a fair question, but perhaps I need to clarify what we mean by writing this. First of all, in this book, one of the topics that I constantly refer to is the one of collaboration. And that's the reason why I invited 20 people to collaborate in my book with 1 or 2 pages, because I believe these people are particularly credible in their own field. One of them is Riccardo Barberis, which is the CEO of Manpower in Northern Europe. And given his position, his experience, I think he has a privileged position to describe what's happening in the job market. What I think Riccardo is referring to, which is a theme that is emerging in my book, that the world of work has changed completely. You know? And in the past, again, we had a very kind of a predictable approach to say you study harder, you focus on a given discipline, you enter into an organization, and then you continue doing this job. Now, the difference between the generation before mine and mine, the generation before mine, like my father, people stayed in the same organization usually for 30, 40 years, okay? My generation, the baby boomers, said, okay, I'll do the job that I've learned to do, not necessarily in the same place. And if I see maybe better options, I move to another one, no? And fair enough, this is what has happened up until rather recently. What I'm trying to convey in my book is to say that modality doesn't work anymore. That doesn't mean that being competent in a given job is not sufficient, is not important at all. You simply say, be mindful that right now, for example, just give you one example, which I think it probably explains quite a lot this concept. For about 60 years, there was a linkage between the development of a country, of a GDP, and employment in that country. So in the moment where the GDP was growing, the unemployment was reduced, and vice versa. Okay, but it's about 20 years that this curve is no longer connected. So we have right now both the highest number of vacancies ever, and the highest number of unemployed people. They became unemployable because these people have no longer the skills to fill the jobs that the new market wants. So we need to, the other element, without entering into many technical details, that by 2030, more than 66% of the people, so 2 people out of 3, will be freelance, would be in a different setting. So the idea, you start a job, you stay in the same organization for 30 years, and then you retire, is no longer valid. You need to have a different mindset, and the keep on learning is one of the elements that's going to be part of the new context that I'm referring to.
Thank you. So another question I have is about a legend of mine, Mr. Muhammad Ali, the greatest boxer ever, the greatest of all time. You use his figure to explain the better game. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Well, listen, in the games that I explain, I call them games because you need to understand not only the principle, but also what regulates the specific game. No? In Italian, I call it passi. Is fundamentally, the first one is called the inner game. The inner game is about clarity, about who you are and what you want to be, okay? Which appear to be a very simple question, but it doesn't necessarily translate in a very simple answer. Once you find out the answer to that question, you have to master the second game, which is called the better game. It's fundamentally how you become bloody good in doing what you're doing, okay? And this, again, is about determination, is about grit, is about focus. And I'm quoting Muhammad Ali because, if I remember by heart, say, listen, you don't win the games in the ring, you win the games before. So in the training, in the fatigue that you endure by being focused on a given result. So I think better game is a lot to do with about focus and about grit and determination, sweat, pain, and also the pleasure to see that by focusing on something, you are becoming better and better. So talent, I think, is overrated because talent, if it's not multiplied by sweat, is just an unexpressed gift that you're not maximizing. And if you look at sports, there are so many talented players that never went anywhere because they lack that second part. And so this quote of Muhammad Ali is focusing on this.
Sure, and let me mention also another great boxer, Rocky Marciano, who was not as talented as Muhammad Ali, but he worked really hard, and he enjoyed training. He said he loved training, so that was probably his secret, the secret of his success.
Yeah, absolutely.
Paolo, tell us about the first game, the inner game, which I find extremely interesting, probably because I'm still working on it. As you see, I'm carefully reading your books. What is it all about?
But it's about, some time ago, I remember I read, I'm an avid reader. And even to prepare for this book, I read and consulted more than 150 books, articles and studies, etc. But I remember there are some quotes in my life that really struck me and they stayed in my heart since then. One of them is from Mark Twain. They said the two most important days of your life are the day where you're born and the day in which you find out why. Yeah, and bloody hell, that phrase is quite powerful because where you find out why is fundamentally find a purpose, find a reason to believe, found something that is meaningful to you, which is much more profound than just finding a job, getting a paycheck at the end of the month. Okay, so the first one is what is your purpose? And when Simon Sinek said start with why, I respect Simon Sinek, but this is something that actually the Greek told us 2,500 years ago with Sisyphus, in which the biggest and harshest punishment wasn't death, but was removing purpose by giving Sisyphus a meaningless activity, which was roll the rock on the top of the mountains and see the rock rolling down. So the Rolling Stones were invented also by the Greek. Long before Mick Jagger. Okay, so joking beside, I think the clarity about your purpose is one pillar, and the second pillar is start to understand what you're good at, and what you're good at is validated by others, and I try to explain also in my first book the difference between what is your passion and what is your talent. Your passion, what you love doing, what talent, what people recognize that you're particularly good in doing, and then, as I said a few minutes ago, you have to multiply this talent by sweat in order this to become a strength. So the inner game is, to me, the foundation. It's like a house. You don't see the foundation of a house, but you know that without that foundation, the house would not stand up. Will not continue to exist. So it's an immensely important part of the work that you need to do as an individual in order to build a foundation that will going to be your foundation for the rest of your professional life.
Let's shift to the concept of leadership. You mentioned a very interesting concept, which is the shift that you make, and you mentioned it in the context of the caring game. The shift that you make when you become a leader, and when you take responsibility, which requires you to stopping maximizing your own performance, but trying to support others. Can you elaborate a little bit on this? I found it very inspiring.
Listen, I elaborate this because I've done that mistake myself now, in which you maybe, what's happening in your journey, you may be good in doing what you're doing, okay? You produce results, and the organization start noticing that you're maybe better than your peers in doing something. And one day somebody say, you've been, just to put a practical example, you've been a great recruiter. You recruited more people than everybody else. You got a very high success rate. Now you're going to be head of human resources. Okay, and you feel that you need to continue to constantly overperform others, and you work even harder, maybe to recruit more people. Okay, and that's you're missing the point. Once you're in charge, it's not anymore about you continuously proving that you're better than the others, but actually you try to make sure that the others are going to be better than you eventually. So it's a completely different game, okay? So it's not focused on you anymore, you're focusing on others. So in a way, you are from Ronaldo trying to score as many goals as possible to a coach that makes sure that everybody in the team is able to score goals. And maybe when you realize that, you don't need Ronaldo anymore on your team. You don't need prima donnas. You need to develop people over there. And people get that. It's very easy to understand this. If you have kids, and I have a daughter, you want her. I want her to develop independent thinking, critical thinking. I want her to be autonomous, independent. No, of course, there are moments which I feel I miss her when she was a little girl, 2 years old, with nappies. But I don't want my daughter, age 18, wearing nappies and with a susette, with a chucho. No, so what I mean by this is you need to help people grow. And you define your success when people are better than you, not by demonstrating you're constantly better than them, okay? And this shift doesn't usually occur in most of the managers that continue to compete with people in their own teams in a way that is actually also unfair, because competing with peers is fair, competing as a leader is not, because you have, il coltello dalla parte del manico. You're still,
you have an edge,
calling the shots, so you have an edge. So it's not an easy shift for people to internalize.
Very interesting. Talking about competition, Paolo, you say that the only person you have to compete with is yourself. What do you mean by that?
I mean, that's one of the things that I do. I bring a mirror to my conferences and I ask who is your competition, who's your main competitor, and people say, it's Fabrizio, it's my colleague. I was at university with Alberto, he was promoted dirigente before I was, blah blah, etc. And that's the wrong answer. The right answer is you competing with you. What I mean by this is you have to be focused in trying to improve the way you perform, the way you act, the way you grow as an individual, and not the others. However, I also ask a very simple question: which is the opposite of collaboration? And a lot of people said competition, and I disagree with that, because I think competition could be an interesting way of improving yourself. And I'm a big fan of tennis. And when Federer retired, he said, I would have not become a Federer without Nadal, even more than Djokovic. And so if you have somebody that is incredibly good in the game you're playing, try to play with this guy this woman, in order to improve your own game. But for the sake of improving your own game, not for the sake of beating him or her, okay? So I think a healthy comparison between people that are very successful and yourself could be a trigger for your self-improvement, but not for the sake of proving him or her that you're better, but for the sake of proving yourself that you can improve.
Talking about success, in your book you encourage people to leave the safe harbor, to follow their dreams and sail in the open sea. 2 questions. First question, very Italian. Aren't you afraid that they might sue you because you make them leave their job and their careers and go bankrupt? And second, you mentioned also some examples of people not having success after this hard choice. Is there a secret for success?
It's this clarity about what you're good at and what you love doing, and what you're also relevant for others. So I'll try to say, listen, you need to find maybe two perspectives. One is clarity about what you're good at, and the second one also clarity about if what you're good at is helpful to people, organizations, or communities. No, so I may say I love playing saxophone, great, which by the way is not true. But if nobody's going to listen, maybe it's going to be just my hobby, which is fair enough, but it's not going to be my activity. So to me, clarity about this is important. This is related to the reinvention game, because usually, and this is in my view, probably the core of my book, a very important part of my book, which is, listen, sooner or later, you're going to stumble into a crisis, okay? And crisis could be a different nature. At times, there are what I call the life quakes. There are earthquakes and life quakes. And the life quakes are when something usually not nice happened to you. It could be a divorce, it could be, something related to your financial or health or physical situation or whatever it is. So usually not nice things that happen to your life. Or alternatively, you can say, listen, eventually I will have this crisis. This crisis usually occurs between your mid-40s and your early 50s, okay? Where you've done whatever you've been doing for 20, 22, 25 years, and you still have probably 15, 20 years in front of you, and you're wondering, what next? And what next is never doing the same in another place. So it's never continuing playing the same game that you've done in the past. No, so you're scratching your head and you're trying to find a meaningful answer. And that's exactly the moment where you understand the difference between managing change and managing a transformation. Okay? When you enter and you stumble into this moment of your life, you need to reinvent yourself. And reinvent yourself is clarity about A, what you're good at, B, how do I deliver, and 3, and would it make sense for people that would get that service, that product, that approach, okay? If you have clarity about this, you can manage the reinvention in a meaningful way. If you don't, I believe you start to decline. And decline doesn't mean losing your job, it means you're bloody bored about what you're doing and you hate being there. And on Wednesday, you start thinking about the weekend, which is not a nice place to be. And so I recommend people to give some thoughts when you enter into this moment.
And if I'm not mistaken, you are a very good example of this change, right? Because you used to be HR manager, you selected some tasks that you loved, and you eliminated other tasks that you didn't love, and you built your new career on that. Is it right?
Listen, I don't know if I would quote myself as a successful transition, but what I do know that I love what I'm doing, and I feel much better also mentally, physically than before, no? So basically, again, I've been an HR director for 17 consecutive years, and I think I was probably pretty good in doing it, but this pretty good is an average between something that was bloody good, something that was okay, and something that was terrible, okay? So I was terrible, for example, in all the areas related to compliance, taxes, payroll, technology, taxes, and pensions, and medical, and just this kind of stuff. Honestly, I always got bored and never really paid too much attention. Then it was a part that I thought I knew how to do it, but didn't really interest me that much, which is the operational dimension of managing large organizations. No? But there is one part that I thought I was very good, and everybody that I work with recognized that I was very good, which is developing people, team, and organizations through coaching, leadership development, training, whatever intervention. So I said, listen, let me do that part, because that part, I love doing it. I was pretty good in doing it. And to me, it is a pleasure keep on learning, studying, working, reading, writing, teaching, and exploring in this domain. So I decided to focus my reinvention in something that I knew was pretty good, and frankly, it worked. And so what I'm trying to say to you is I'm a just perfectly normal guy, and if it worked for me, it's going to work for you.
So the takeaway is going to be, if you need a top-notch professional coach, call Paolo. If you need a tax advisor, don't call him.
The second part, possibly. The second one, absolutely yes. So don't call me. I don't. In fact, I don't do my taxes. I mean, I just don't do my taxes. I don't understand anything on the topic.
Okay, then I think the last question, because I think we're running out of time, Fiammetta.
Yes, exactly. Perfectly on time.
Okay, the last question, Paolo, is going to be about a big macro trend of today, which is diversity. Every meaningful organization is talking about diversity, how to promote it, how to sustain it. I would like to ask you a question about this. Isn't diversity at odds with meritocracy? Don't we run the risk of, by promoting diversity at any cost, of stopping promoting the best at any cost?
I understand the question, and again, it's like a knife. Like depends the way you use it. So if you use it to cut the bread, it's great. If you use it to stab in the back, your brother is not. But living beside this analogy, I like to perhaps put a point that maybe people don't focus too much. Which is as a leader in organizations, or as an individual, even if you're not a leader in whatever organization, when you deal with the problems that you're dealing with, do you consider the problem complex or complicated? And this is not just a semantic difference, it's a fundamental difference. A complicated problem implies technical expertise. Yeah. So let's say that my computer breaks, I have no idea how to fix it. I have to, call Apple and say, can you fix it? So a complicated problem implies the necessity of having technical expertise in this given domain. Yeah. So if you have a toothache, you go to the dentist. It's a complicated problem, and only the person with that expertise could actually solve it. You're not going to stop your neighbor to say, can you please fix it? You know where to go. Okay. Complicated problem implies technical expertise. But the problem that we are dealing with right now as individuals, as leaders, they're not only complicated, they're complex. And if you think about COVID, the job market, climate change, or what's happening right now in Ukraine or in Gaza, these are very messy problems that are incredibly not only complicated but complex. A complexity of a problem implies the need to engage with people in different domains in order to solve it. So you need two ingredients. The first one, trust. Okay, why, for example, we're here, Fabrizio, today? Because you trust me and I trust you. Had the opposite been true, you would have not invited me, or I would have not accepted your invitation. So the first one is trust. The second, because of the complexity of the problems, you need to have diversity on the table in order to leverage the diverse approach of different people around the table to solve that different problem. So diversity is not just a compliance issue. You need to have so many women, so many African American, so many people that are yellow, blue, or green, or whatever it is. This is just a compliance issue. To me, it's much more profound. The necessity to solve complex problems imply that you need to use a very diverse network of perspective in order to bring everybody on the table to solve by creating trust. So if diversity is understood that way, in my view, every organization should welcome. If diversity is understood in terms of imposing quotas at the expense of meritocracy, then of course there is a negative connotation on diversity that can be a frustrating element in every organization. And I like to think that people think about diversity within the first framework, not on the second.
Paolo Gallo, the 7 Games of Leadership. It was great talking to you, Paolo, and we are honored to have you here in Zurich on the 30th of May to present your book.
Looking forward to this conversation. Grazie, thanks so much, and looking forward to see all you in Zurich in a couple of months.
Thank you to Paolo Gallo. Thank you to Fabrizio Macrì. I'm super fascinating about the speech, and I'll be obviously in the public on the public meeting, and we want to invite you to keep in touch with the Italian Chamber of Commerce and visiting our website. We have a Crowdy events page that is perfect for you to be always update on our events. So thank you so much to both of you, and to the person that are listening this podcast, and see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye bye. Ciao.
Bye.
Cheers.